Hi, I'm Debbie Harbeck, and I'm a certified life coach working with women in midlife and through the menopause transition. So each week, I'll be sharing the latest information, inspiration, and generate some momentum so you can move forward and feel more in control of your changing midlife body and your life. Let's go. Hi, and welcome to the Midlife Momentum Podcast. I have a special episode today because I have a guest with me. My guest is Courtney Boyer. She is a relationship and sexuality expert and author of the book, Not Tonight, Honey, Why Women Actually Don't Want Sex and What We Can Do About It. She has been featured in publications including Parents, Cosmopolitan, The Independent, and The Mirror. And Courtney believes we can reclaim our power through our sexuality, and she helps her clients infuse passion and creativity into their lives by helping them uncover what's preventing them from connecting with their pleasure and purpose. As her work in this field develops, Courtney is drawn to the emerging fields of epigenetics, neuropsychology, and energy work. She's trained in evidence-based methods like NLP, EMDR, IFS, and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So welcome, Courtney, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. So I just want you to take a moment to tell us what exactly you do in your day-to-day and who are the people you help?
Yes. So I help women predominantly, but I also work with couples. I've worked with men historically as well, pretty much any gender who is interested in learning more about their own sexuality. And when I refer to sexuality, I don't mean like if they're gay or straight or any of that. It's much more about their connection with their sexual being, their connection with pleasure, sensuality, passion, those kind of things. In my day-to-day, I do a lot of not very sexy things, a lot of research, a lot of writing, connecting with clients. We do a lot of talking, somatic work, meditations, breathing exercises, and then also just planning, events that I get excited about and collaborate with.
All right. So it sounds like you have pretty full days.
Yes.
And so when it comes to your clientele, do you work mostly with women in midlife, or you work with all kinds of women or men too?
Yeah, I'd say predominantly I work with individuals in midlife. So it just depends on the season. Usually I'll get an influx of men, it seems, and then it'll kind of like even back out, and then I'll have more women. So and then it's like, oh my gosh, I've got like 4 sets of couples. So yeah, it varies, but most of them are midlife, absolutely, which is why I was really excited to be a guest on here because, I'm 40 myself and a lot of my friends are midlife. And so this is a very personal topic for me as well.
Okay, that's great because I know there's a lot of women in my audience who will be very interested in this conversation, and myself included. So I'll start by asking, so when it comes to midlife, especially women in midlife, because that is my audience, what are the things that you see? What are we experiencing physically and otherwise when it comes to sex and sexuality?
Yeah. So what I see for a lot of women in midlife is an opportunity to really connect with an awakened self. So a lot of women in midlife start to hit this kind of, I've been married for like 10-ish or so years, and we're pretty settled. We've got kids in the house, and I'm in a job, or I just went back to work, and this isn't that fulfilling. Am I going to keep doing this for the next 40 years with this same person? And we start to see a lot of women asking questions about pleasure and satisfaction and really contemplating, like, is this really it? And so I see a big curiosity for women in midlife, which I think is phenomenal. I think it's such a brave first step, because I think back to like my mom's generation, and it's not that these, issues are brand new, but it's finally among a generation of women where we are safe enough, and a lot of us are financially independent enough to ask the questions that we are brave enough to face the answers to.
I love that. And I too, I work with women in midlife, and this is the time where I see too that they're being brave enough. I like that word brave, to
Mm,
start asking questions. And I love that, this is about sex and sexuality. So when we talk about that, and I think that takes another maybe level of bravery because it isn't something that we put out there commonly. Like it's not
right.
something we talk
Absolutely.
about, right? So I think it takes
No.
a little extra courage to come and say,
Yes.
you know what, my sex life isn't that fulfilling, or,
Hmm.
how do
Absolutely.
I find pleasure? And is it okay? Is it okay? So all these
Absolutely.
questions, right? So what do you say
Yeah.
to that? How do you start with that?
Well, the first thing I want to do is give them a big hug because
Oh,
like we just discussed, it's takes so much vulnerability to admit that. I think, as women, I was raised of the generation of like women can do it all. And which is great that we have the opportunity like no women before us have, but there's also been so much pressure to like be flawless when we do that. And so I think when women are brave enough to admit like my marriage may look flawless or my house or everything's Pinteresty and we look like the perfect couple and everything's great. When they're brave enough to admit like, you know what, like actually I don't really enjoy sex that much and it's just another thing on my to-do list. I think that is one of the most bravest things that a woman can do, is to really admit that she is not satisfied sexually. And I think that there's a fear of like, oh my gosh, but then I'm gonna, I'm pointing fingers at my partner and he's a great, or, they're a great person and all of these things. And it's really not about the other person. Like that's one of the things that I talk about in one of the chapters in my book, is that it's not our partner's responsibility to give us pleasure. Like it is our responsibility to advocate for the things that we desire and the things that we believe give us pleasure. And then in collaboration with our partner, then we're able to achieve those things. But a lot of times we've never had those like really awkward, to be honest, because most people don't have conversations about this with their partners. We have to be brave enough to bring this up with our partner. But first, we have to be brave enough to admit, like, maybe I'm not as happy or fulfilled or sexually satisfied as I thought I was.
wow. Yeah. I think that is bravery right there. And
Yeah.
I love that you said it's, we don't want to say it, we don't want to put the other person down. We don't want to make them feel bad,
No,
but it really is
no.
us because I think we
Yes.
don't know what we want. We don't know what truly
Yes.
gives us pleasure. And it's
Yes.
our responsibility, not their responsibility to find out. And
100%. Yep.
yeah. Okay. So how do you find out?
Yeah, great. What is the magic pill, Courtney? Tell me where I can get it on Amazon so I can, prime it to me. I mean, that's really what people want to hear. And I totally, hey, I'm all about the easy button. Gosh, I miss those Staples commercials. Those are fun. When you just could, have it automatically fixed and delivered to you. But unfortunately, our pleasure doesn't work that way for the most part. And so the first step that I talk about is really just that self-awareness. Like, where do I feel like I'm disconnected? Where do I feel like I'm lacking? Where does it feel broken? And I don't love using that word, but that's the verbiage that a lot of women will use when they come to me. They will say, am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? And so when you give yourself that permission to admit those feelings, that is absolutely step number one. So start by just take an assessment of where you're at and how you're feeling. There is nothing wrong with how you're feeling. So I never tell anybody like, you're not broken. I mean, I do, but not in an explicit way, because I never want somebody to feel like their feelings are being dismissed. So if they feel broken, then that's a very real, visceral feeling a lot of times in their body. And so we explore that and what that looks like and how that's preventing them from showing up in certain ways. And then we start to explore like, okay, so what does pleasure look like in your life? What does your relationship with even that word? For so many people, even for me, who's like a sexologist and a sexpert, like for a really long time, I hated the word pleasure because I just gave me the creeps. I'm like, what is this emphasis on pleasure all about? And it's funny how I ended up coming home to it, and it really became my path to help empower other women by helping them to connect with the things that bring them pleasure.
Mm. So anything that brings them pleasure, is that what it is? Like
Anything. Yes.
anything.
And
Yeah.
yep. Yes. I think when we hear the word pleasure, we get tripped up and we assume it only means sexual pleasure. And for women who've never given themselves permission to really be present in their body, to receive, to experience that pleasure sexually, that whole concept of pleasure can feel really disempowering and overwhelming. And so I help, women say, let's start anywhere. Does drinking coffee in the morning, is that a pleasure for you? Is going on a walk at sunset, is that a pleasure for you? Like starting to reframe life in a way where you start to prioritize pleasurable things and pleasurable experiences.
And you start to give yourself permission. And I like that you use that
Yes.
word, because I think that's something a lot of women in my practice too, they come to me, and I think a lot of times they're just looking for permission to take care of
Yes.
themselves. And
Yes.
in this case, they're looking for permission to experience pleasurable things, that it's okay,
Yes.
and to take the time to
Absolutely.
actually do them. So I
Yeah.
love that. And so, okay, so they're exploring what pleasure looks like in their life,
Mhm.
which I think is a great idea. Like, I love that idea, as simple as a cup of coffee in the morning.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so once they do that, so it's just about incorporating those things more regularly. Is that the next step?
Yeah. So in the book, I talk about creating a pleasure practice. And so this is something that can be super simple. My goal with my clients is to do one non-sexual and one sexual pleasure practice, and finding a way to be consistent. So for some people, like, yeah, every day I can commit to doing a sexual and non-sexual pleasure practice. And it could be something as simple as what we just talked about. Like in the morning, I'm just going to be present with this cup of coffee, and I'm going to really inhale the aroma, and I'm going to savor the flavor, and I'm just going to be grateful and just embody this coffee moment. So it can be, again, it's super simple, but when we make these small changes, our brain is like, okay, that feels safe enough. Like we're not like freaking out. This is where I see a lot of people who in anything, it's like they white knuckle it. They think, okay, I've got to go completely cold turkey. I'm going to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop eating sugar. And they can get some short-term wins, but what ends up happening is in the long term, they end up doing so much more damage, and they ruin really that relationship they had with whatever quote vice it is. And so this is really the opposite of that. It's really about just small calibrations so that the person feels connected to that experience or to that object that is bringing her pleasure.
Yeah, I like that too. And that's very much what I do too, is small steps, taking those
Mm-hmm.
just a small thing that you can do,
Yeah,
that you're willing to commit to and try and see it. Maybe it's not the thing that you think it's going to be. So, and then it's
absolutely.
kind of like an experiment, right? Maybe it isn't the coffee
Yes,
that's really pleasurable. Maybe it's something else about that moment that's
100%.
pleasurable.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that. And then when you talk about one thing sexual, is it something you need to do with your partner, or is it something for yourself?
No, you can, it's
Okay.
all about yourself. And so it doesn't, what ends up happening is that if we are partnered, and that's one thing I tell women, I said, you don't have
Mm.
to be in a relationship now or even want to be in a relationship ever to work on your sexual relationship. I think, again, there's so much messaging growing up of like, if you don't have anybody, then you're nobody. And that's where you find value, especially in women, is taking care of another person, being in a committed romantic relationship. And that's not for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can still be in a sexual relationship, albeit with yourself if you're single,
Mhm.
and still enjoy the benefits of creating a pleasure practice that is sexually based. And so when I work with women, it's really about helping them to come home to themselves, really helping
Mm.
them to come back to their bodies, to come back to sensuality, to come back to their whole sexual self so that they can figure out, how do I love myself? How do I see myself as a sexual being? How do I know what I desire? How do I then communicate if I am in a relationship? How do I communicate those desires to someone I'm in a sexual relationship with?
like what you were saying, it's seeing yourself as a sexual being, seeing
Yeah.
like how, because I think, and a lot of women, because I do work with women in midlife, and a lot of them are just having a hard time accepting seeing themselves at all, like seeing their
Yes. Yeah.
bodies at all. They don't want to
Yeah.
necessarily even look at it. So
hmm
it's I would think that there's some steps into getting to the point
Absolutely.
where you can see yourself and actually appreciate your sexuality.
Yeah. No, 100%. And one of the things for me that really helped me like personally see it was that I realized that one of the like smartest ways that women become disempowered is by disconnecting from our bodies.
Mm,
Like our sexuality, our where our sexual energy is housed in our body is such a powerhouse of like that is where we birth inspiration and passion and desire, excitement, joy. Like those things come from the same place that sexuality does. And so what better way to disempower and women than by disconnecting them from their bodies? And so I really see like us coming home to our bodies as an act of resistance against those forces of power who seek to control and oppress women.
wow, that's powerful. That is powerful. So yeah, I can totally see that. How if we're connected to our bodies, I know how powerful that is, and
Yes.
how
Yeah.
good you can feel about yourself, and how there's permission there. And it's true. It's almost like
Yeah.
we've been they've taken the permission away from us to relate to our bodies in a way, and this
Yeah.
just like takes all that back. And I oh, wow, that's powerful. Thank you for
Thank you.
putting it
Yeah.
that way. It really
Well, and
is.
it's also a way that we get distracted too, right? Like if we're so consumed with counting calories and comparing ourselves to other women, and like we shrink ourselves physically, but also energetically. And then we don't get to show up in the biggest way that we were meant to and make a difference with the gifts that we've been individually given. And so for me, like do I still struggle with my body image some days? Absolutely, especially depending on where I'm at in my menstrual cycle. But I really come home to this belief that like, man, when I focus on that, then I miss out on really focusing on ways to make a difference and be my most authentic self.
Oh yeah, I definitely relate to that, because I'm just thinking of times where I did feel, I guess, better in tune with my sexual self, and how much that affected
Mm.
the rest of my life, how much
Yes.
more
Oh,
confident I was, how much,
yeah.
and it goes up and down for me too. It's not every day I feel like, oh yeah, I feel really that great about myself, but then there are days that I
Yeah.
do. So like everything else, it comes and goes a
Yeah.
little bit, but I think you do need
hmm
to work on it. And so, yeah, so how do we work on that? How do we get to the point where we feel in ourselves better? Where do we start, especially if we're starting from a
Yeah.
place where we don't feel great about our bodies?
Yeah. I think the first step is acknowledgement. Like, again, that self awareness of like, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And really taking a perspective of curiosity instead of judgment. I think it's so easy for us to go into that critical voice of, well, you're 50 pounds overweight and you're in a sexless marriage and you're in a dead end job. And right, we can focus on the things that like just suck the life out of us. And that makes it really hard to find pleasure. And it makes it really hard to want to come home to ourselves. And so when we start to get curious about the good and the quote bad, that isn't the best, most honest place we can be. And I think that's something that I really try to emphasize in the work that I do, is that authenticity and that honesty that we have to have with ourselves. But honesty doesn't mean cruelty. There is no need to be cruel to ourselves. There is no need to be unkind. We can still be honest from a place of love and compassion. And so then I think the next place is really starting to think about the things that we consume physically, emotionally. Like, what are the shows that I'm watching? What are the podcasts that I'm listening to? What are the books that I'm reading? What is the music? What are the people in my life? I've heard that your nervous system is the average of the 5 most common nervous systems that you spend time with. So if you spend a lot of time with anxious, critical people, you bet that you're going to probably be an anxious and critical person, or have an anxiety or a nervous system that is always on a fight or flight alert, because that's what it's being primed to when you're around those other people energetically. So those are the kind of the biggest steps. And again, it's not that we're not talking drastic. You don't need to cut everybody out of your life who's drama, and you don't need to cut out every, all of the sugar or all of the dairy or, all of the true crime podcasts. It's just, how can I bring a notice? How can I notice these things that are maybe not life-giving to me, that probably don't cause me to love humans more or to love myself more? Like, how am I nourishing, and really coming from a place of nourishment? How can I nourish my soul? Like, do I need to go pray? Do I need to meditate? Do I need to go for a walk in nature? How do I nourish my body? How do I nourish my mind? How do I nourish my emotions? And really come at it from that place. And those don't even cost any money typically. I'm a big fan of hiring help and hiring experts. If I really want to get results, I know that I have to put my money and my time and my energy where I want to go. And that requires me to hire experts to do that. And if you're not ready, that's okay. You can start with those suggestions that I just had. And those are all free.
Yeah, no, they are. And I love them. And it really is all just about awareness. Like you said, it's the first step is just to be aware of what are you putting into your body? How are you nourishing yourself right now, or not nourishing yourself right now? And how do you go about it without judging yourself, and without being cruel about it, like you said? Because I think that is a tendency, is that when we see ourselves doing things that we don't want to be doing, I think we as women tend to be very hard on ourselves and think that in being hard on myself, I'm going to stop doing it.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody hated themselves into anything, what I say is love is the only true catalyst of change.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally believe that. And then self-compassion, and there's so much to be said for that. And I think people think, oh, that would be nice. But if you don't go there, I do think it's really hard to get through all this, because you're constantly going to be judging yourself and judging your body and so forth. So,
and also judging others too. Like, that's how we measure others, is how we measure ourselves, and vice versa. And, that's something that I realized, especially being a mom, that I wanted to really model for my kids, because I grew up in a very critical household. My body was always criticized, what other people's bodies were always criticized, what they were wearing, what they were eating. And I just was very conscious of, I'm not going to do that I'm not going to raise kids that way. And so that has helped to really shape the way I see other people, because I did grow up very critical of others, because I was always being criticized. And I just thought that was normal. I thought, of course, that's how you, and I think I want your listeners to understand, I've tried the hating yourself into a smaller size, or into this boxed image that I thought that people expected of me, or, society was telling me I needed to be. And I was miserable. And you just cannot sustain the kind of life that you want, that is rooted in love, when you are motivated from a place of hate and disgust.
Oh yeah, that is so, so good. That's so true. And it applies, to everything, because that's exactly what I'm all about too, is coming from that other place that we're really not used to, that we really didn't see growing up. A lot of families, I think, like yours, were very critical, and we came from that environment, and especially maybe our moms or the other women in our lives were critical or self-critical. And that's what we've come to see as normal, and it's not. And it's not the best way to make a change or do things differently, or to get in closer contact with yourself, which is, I think, what we need. So for women who are because I'm further along than you, so you're 40, I'm 51. For women that are a little older, that are going through physical changes, would you do anything differently, or do you approach it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, for women, I'd say a lot of it is approached the same way. I'm a big fan of having as much information. arming ourselves with as much education as we can about our bodies. So I always encourage clients, no matter their age, to get their hormonal levels checked, to get just basic, like a CBC panel to see like how's our thyroid levels doing, and how's our, A1C and whatnot, because, blood chemistry, body chemistry, that plays a significant impact on our overall sexual health. And so, especially as women age, it would just be ludicrous not to consider how our hormonal changes affect us sexually. And so definitely being, like, are you in menopause? Are you perimenopause, postmenopausal? And being just education around, okay, these are some things that you're going to be facing physically. There's nothing wrong with you. You did nothing bad about this. This is just as part of your changes. So here's what you can do, or let's talk about ways that you can set yourself up for success sexually so that you aren't feeling discouraged or frustrated or confused by, for a lot of women who are, in their midlife, in their 50s, they're menopausal, postmenopausal, and they're very dry vaginally. And that's just one of the side effects of aging. The vaginal wall's thin. So it's a lot easier for lesions and tears to occur during intercourse if you don't use a lubricant. And so just even having that conversation again, and it's really permission giving, like, I give you permission to go to the store and buy a water-based lube, and that may sound silly, but for some people, they're like, oh my gosh, okay, I can do that. Yeah, I never thought about that. And so it's really just about equipping people depending on their stage. I work with a lot of women who are postpartum, and their body needs are different than a woman who hasn't had a kid in 10 years or has never had kids or who's menopausal. And so really targeting, client specific to whatever their needs are based on their changing hormones is super important.
Yeah. And I really like that, because I think a lot of women will just resign themselves to, oh, I guess this is just life now. And there's nothing I can do about it because my body has changed, whether I've just had a baby or I'm going through menopause. My body has changed, and this is just the way it is, because either it's uncomfortable to talk about it, or it's just like, I guess this is just what I'm supposed to do, is just accept this. And I just love that. Yeah, no, you don't have to. You don't have to stay there. There are things you can do about it.
Yes.
And
yes.
I love that. So do you have like a client in particular that you can think of that you could tell us about, that where she, changed her, I guess, view of herself sexually and is feeling better about herself these days? That would be helpful.
Yeah. So there's so many. There's a couple that come to mind. There's one client I had where she's amazing. Like, I'm actually friends with her now. And that's one of the cool things about my work, is that I am friends with so many of the clients that I've worked with, and it's fun to see where they're at now, even though we don't work together anymore. And so when I first started working with this woman, she was like, I asked her, like, do you have any negative self-talk? And she was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, well, I just would like you to like, just keep a journal or open a notes app in your phone. And just like anytime you notice, right, we're bringing that first step, that self-awareness of some negative self-talk, can you just like write it down for me? And she was like, yeah, I don't think it's going to have anything. And I said, okay. And so sure enough, our next session, she was like, Courtney, you will not believe how much negative self-talk I have. And I mean, I knew she did, because the thing about people is our behaviors are a reflection of our beliefs. And so that's kind of like if you want an insight into the work that I do, that's always my little magic window into what's going on in a person's mind, is what is happening in their behaviors. And so because of some of the behaviors that she was experiencing and things that she was doing, I knew that she didn't have a good relationship with herself, definitely not with her body. And so but I wanted her to find that evidence on her own, instead of me telling her like, well, of course you don't love yourself, and so that realization really, that experience, that homework assignment, that experience allowed her to really start to open up to the whole process with me, and really being like, wow, there's so much here that I was not even aware of. And so that allowed us to really begin to go on this path together, and to really, for her, a lot of it was reconnecting with her body and really loving her body and feeling like she was deserving of good and pleasurable things. And for so many of the women that I work with, that is something that they cannot say in the first several sessions, that they just don't believe it. And it's a hard pill to swallow, that concept of, I really am deserving of good and pleasurable things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women find themselves there, that they feel like they have to do something to be deserving. They have to, I don't know, or they need permission, but deserving, that's such a huge thing. And
Yeah.
I think it's just getting them to the point where they really realize that they deserve it just as much as anybody else. And
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
really important. I love that. And I love the idea that it's true. Our behaviors are a reflection of our belief. And so all you need to do is look at somebody's behaviors to kind of figure out, well, what are they believing about themselves? And how
Absolutely.
powerful. I think that would be a great exercise, actually, because that was going to be my next question for you is, do you have some tools or tips or ideas that you can give right now to my audience that they can start working on this connection with themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start there. Like, how
Mhm.
often, and even just asking yourself this question by looking at yourself in the mirror. That mirror work is one of the most powerful work that you can do. But like, if you can say, by looking at yourself in the mirror, I am worthy and deserving of good and pleasurable things, and you don't feel resistance anywhere in your body when you say that, or you're not able to complete the sentence without crying or without looking away or shutting your eyes, then that's a place that you should start and tune into that and see, because our bodies don't lie. I think a lot of times that is one of the reasons why we disconnect from them, is because we know how powerful of a messenger they are to us. It's our bodies are always speaking to us intuitively and like giving us a nudge here, or like just pulling back, or like, man, this isn't settling with me right, or like, oh, my gut's telling me this, or like I feel some tension, like. But when we disconnect from our bodies, we lose that ability, and we really divorce ourselves from the magic that lies within us as women. And so I think when we start to like come home to ourselves and reconnect those wires between the mind and the body, like incredibly powerful things happen.
Yeah, I can. So I guess you're standing in front of the mirror naked. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, you don't even have to stand. I
Okay,
mean,
so
I'm sure, like, be
just your
bald.
face.
Yeah. Uterus up. Yeah. I mean, yeah, girl, you get that. But like, some people can't, that idea is way too much for them. They're like, hell no.
Uh-huh.
So I will take whatever you will give me. So if we can do from the neck up, if you need to be fully clothed, but looking in a full length mirror, try different settings and see where you start to see that resistance, because it will show up in your body. It will be like, oh, I just felt a surge in my gut, or like I felt a lump in my throat, or like my heart just felt like it like skipped 12 beats, yeah.
So is the idea then to do this work daily until you can say it,
Yes.
and mean it?
Yes. I mean, the work, yes, it's every day. It's just like anything else. If I was training for a marathon, or I was, learning how to sew or play the piano, like the goal is to just do consistent behavior modification, or behavior injecting new things into your life that are sustainable. And so being able to find that sweet spot of, okay, I'm not going to, marathon runners, they don't run every day. Usually they take some rest days and stuff. And that body's still working on those rest days, even if it's not, quote, actively doing things. And so my goal is to help my clients do something every day, even if it's small, even if they just sit in silence for 5 minutes, or they're not the first one to get up at the dinner table to clear the plates. It doesn't have to be adding something. Sometimes it can just be saying no, or it can be the point of it is that the goal is, yes, to do something every day. You don't have to do mirror work every day, because it just, when I work with clients, we figure out a plan together of what that everyday thing looks like. But if you're not working with somebody, finding something that does fit and you're going to do, like, that you are going to force yourself to do from a place of love, and know that it's because you deserve better.
And I like that. I like the little things that you can do every day, like the saying no, like deciding you're not going to do something that you usually would do, just because you are worthy and deserving of good and pleasurable things. So yeah, you can sit at the table and enjoy it while other people clear their own dishes away. And even just that small thing, I can see how that could be hard for a lot of women to do, to just sit there.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
but it's so telling, and it's so telling of, like, are you saying you don't deserve to be able to sit there while somebody else picks up the dishes? It's so
well,
simple.
someone serves you, somebody serves you, and that's what I see too. It sexually is, so many women struggle to receive, is we have been programmed to be pleasure providers, that the idea that we are there to receive pleasure is like a freaking foreign concept. It, like, an orgasm just happens like by chance, like, oh, good on me. But like one that's intentional, where my partner doesn't get anything else out of it and I just get something. You should see, like, sometimes people's heads look like they're going to spin when I say, when we get to that point of like, oh no, Courtney, I can't do that. Like, I can't ask for it just to be about me. And it's like, okay. And that's just because we've been conditioned, like what you were just saying, like, to serve and to be there for to be a human giver and not a human being.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What you just said is so true. I mean, I'm just thinking of myself in this, my own life, and how it was all about the partner. It was all about the partner for so long. And even when I decided I was gonna, and I guess I just did it sort of step by step in my own mind, was your mind goes to like, oh my gosh, this isn't right. This isn't right, that I should be getting everything and he's not getting. And it's just so strange. And, but it evolves over time when you just allow yourself to say, no, I deserve this too. And I deserve to feel good. And I don't need to then reciprocate all the time. It can be just about me sometimes, which is, so hard for so many women. So I love that you brought that up. That's a powerful thing. And I think it's something that we learn at the very beginning, right? At the very beginning, when we have our first sexual experiences, I think a lot of women, it's because of the partner, especially in a heterosexual situation. I would say it's a lot of the times it's to please him, and not about pleasing ourselves. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And that just sticks with us. And that's, oh boy, that's why I love midlife. Because like you said, all these questions start coming up, and like, why am I doing it this way? Why am I not thinking of myself here?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, this is wonderful. This is great. I really appreciate like everything you've shared with us. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything else you think we should know before you go?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think for me, like, I really like to bring it back to activism in a way. And so one of my favorite quotes that I came up with was, a pleasured woman is a powerful woman, and powerful women can change the world. And I truly believe that, like, when we start to prioritize our pleasure, we become so powerful in who we are and in who we were meant to be. And I just wish that so much for every woman.
Amen. I just think that's exactly what it is. And you know what? Like I work with women who don't feel great in their bodies. Usually that's why they come to me. They're in midlife, their bodies are changing. Some of them want to lose weight. And I think a lot of the time it's not about the weight loss. It's not about even the change. It's about that feeling of, I own myself. I own my body. I'm confident. I'm carrying myself in this way. That's what they want.
Absolutely.
And it's really is about that, and owning your own pleasure is a big piece of that. And yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that you've brought that here today, because so many women need to hear this, and it's wonderful. So
thank you.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So before you go, I do like to ask this question: is what's the best part for you of getting older?
Oh man. I would say giving less cares. That's the polite way of saying it. For so long I was such a people pleaser and such an overachiever, and I thought that, man, if I achieve and I show the world how amazing I am, then I'll belong, and then I will matter. And it wasn't until I started to realize that, like, no one cares. Like, you will never be enough in the eyes of the world. It's only until you're enough in your own eyes that's when things start to change. And that's what happened for me at midlife, is I realized that I was enough, and I started to see myself differently and advocate for myself because I saw myself differently. And that's when, like, magical things started happening. So I love being midlife because it is so freeing. It is the most free I've ever felt.
Okay. Yes, I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think it is that moment where we can say, I am enough, and this is the time to do it, because this is our time. So I love that. I really appreciate that you shared that. And so, thank you, Courtney, if anybody wants to learn more about you or about your business, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can either go to my website. It's Courtney Boyer Coaching or just CourtneyBoyerCoaching.com. And then I'm on, like, almost all the social medias. I'm not on Twitter, but like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and that's at Courtney with a C, Boyer Coaching. And you can send me a message or an email. I love connecting with people. And also my book is on Amazon or other reading platforms that you can check that out there too.
Oh, yes, we will. And I'm going to include all of that in the show notes so that anybody who wants to buy your book or wants to connect with you, they can go and do so right away. And I do encourage you to go buy her book for sure.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, Courtney, for joining us today. And I hope we can connect soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Midlife Momentum Podcast. If you want to learn more about working with me, come visit me at DebbieHarbeckCoaching.com. That's Debbie, I-E, Harbeck with a C, coaching.com. See you next week.